I used to fantasize about getting hit by a car, not killed, just bumped hard enough to break a bone or two. A hospital bed felt like a vacation. No emails, no meetings, just white sheets and permitted sleep. When your daydreams feature ambulance rides, you know something's gone horribly wrong inside. Fast forward to a Tuesday morning not long ago. I was sitting in my parked car outside my office, hands frozen on the steering wheel. I couldn't even make myself open the car door. My chest was hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left a yawning ache. There was no dramatic trigger, no last straw, just the quiet certainty that I absolutely could not do this anymore. My mind and body had submitted their 2 weeks' notice without asking me. At that moment, I realized burnout isn't just being tired, it's the slow erasure of everything that makes you feel alive. It's your soul on a picket line. The sign it holds reads, "On strike, back whenever." And I was finally reading the message. The garden of neglect. Numbness. For months, I moved through life like a ghost haunting my own routine. I got up, went to work, smiled when I was supposed to, said the right things, but I wasn't truly there in any real way. I'd lost the ability to feel much of anything. No joy, no sadness, just a dull static hiss where my emotions should be. Inside, I pictured a garden I used to tend eagerly when I was younger. My passions, my curiosity, my silly little hobbies. Over the years of grinding and hustling, I hadn't just neglected that garden, I'd practically salted the earth. What was left was tangled with weeds of apathy and overgrowths of fatigue, and every flower that ever grew there had wilted from neglect. I was numb, standing in a wasteland of my own making, wondering why nothing beautiful was blooming. Numbness is insidious. You don't notice when it creeps in because it doesn't hurt. It's the absence of hurt, of joy, of purpose. I told myself I was just tired or in a funk. But deep down I knew I had become a stranger to myself, an empty garden, a ghost, a shell. One night I dropped a plate in my kitchen and watched it shatter. I just stared at the pieces. Normal me would have cursed or cried or something. Burned out me just sighed, left the shards on the floor and went to bed without even bothering to sweep them up. When apathy invades your soul that deeply, it's like you're already half dead. The pressure cooker? Anger. Then one day the numbness cracked and all the suppressed feeling came roaring out as anger, sharp, stupid, useless anger. I became a tightly wound pressure cooker with no safety valve, ready to blow at the smallest provocation. And it wasn't righteous, movie scene anger either, it was the petulant, irrational kind. At work, a teammate dared to ask me if I'd finished a report, so I slammed my laptop shut so hard it echoed. "Don't you think I know what I have to do?" I snapped. The poor guy backed away as if I'd thrown boiling water at him, and in that moment I truly hated him. But really, I hated myself for being so broken yet still trying to play the part of the reliable worker bee. Burnout had filled me with a quiet resentment toward everyone and everything. A coworker talking too loudly, an email arriving at 5:01 p.m., even the cheerful "hope you're doing well." At the start of messages, each felt like an insult to my collapsing sanity. I was furious that the world kept demanding things I no longer had. Furious at myself for failing to meet those demands. One evening I got home and found the front door jammed in its frame. That was the final straw. I lost it over a stuck door. I kicked it once, twice, until the frame splintered and I collapsed on the hallway floor, my toe throbbing in my shoe. It wasn't really about the door, it was months of self-neglect and swallowed frustration finding a weak spot to erupt through, a pressure cooker blowing its lid, a volcano insensible business casual. That night I lay in the dark with a bag of frozen peas on my foot, feeling the hot anger ebb into shame. I realized I'd been angry at everyone who expected me to be okay, but most of all I was angry that I'd driven myself to this breaking point. The rage felt powerful, but underneath it I sensed a deeper pain waiting to be acknowledged. Broken compass. Loss of purpose and grief. My anger burned out as quickly as it flared, leaving behind ashes of grief. A heavy sadness settled in my chest, the kind that makes every breath feel like lifting a weight. If anger was a volcano, grief was the ocean that came after, cold and boundless, swallowing everything. I found myself wandering through old memories, like flipping through a tattered photo album. I thought of who I used to be, a kid who devoured novels, a student who published poetry in the school zine, a friend who made people laugh until they cried. I hadn't spoken to that person in years, and I missed them. Burnout didn't just exhaust me, it stole pieces of what made me me. Without those passions and quirks, I had no internal compass anymore. I was directionless, aimless, like a sailor lost at sea with the North Star hidden behind smog, like a hiker with a busted compass spinning uselessly as I wandered in circles. I grieved for the years that had vanished into deadlines and conference calls, and for the relationships that withered because I had no energy to water them. I grieved for myself, for the self I sacrificed at the altar of productivity. Sometimes I would find myself crying in the shower, hand over my mouth to muffle the sobs, because I didn't even feel I had the right to be this sad. On paper, nothing was wrong with my life. I had a job, a paycheck, health insurance, a roof over my head. What a luxury to cry about burnout, right? I thought, and that thought made me hate myself even more. But the tears came anyway, an ocean of sorrow for a person I wasn't sure I could ever get back. I realized I was holding a quiet funeral in my heart, saying goodbye to the vibrant creative soul that once lived in me, mourning the time I lost and the memories I never made because I was so damn busy. The grief was necessary. It meant I cared, that there was something in me worth missing. The cracked clock, guilt and surrender. Even as I waded through sadness, an annoying little voice in my head kept whispering, "Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Get back to work. You're behind." I felt guilty for being a wreck. Guilty for taking sick days when I wasn't physically sick. Guilty for every unanswered text and each voicemail I let languish. Guilt is a relentless taskmaster. Even when I finally took a break, it sat at my bedside tapping its foot. Every minute I spent resting felt stolen from something else. I'd glance at the clock, and its ticking sounded like a countdown to some vague failure, showing me all the tasks I was avoiding. In my head, I hadn't earned the right to rest because I hadn't fixed everything yet. How could I relax when emails were piling up and the world was moving on without me? One afternoon, that ticking clock finally pushed me over the edge as I lay on the couch, ostensibly resting, while my mind raced through a litany of worries. The clock on my wall ticked and ticked, each second accusing me of laziness. Something in me snapped, and I yanked the clock off the wall and hurled it across the room. It hit the opposite wall and the glass faceplate shattered, the hands frozen at 3:07. I sat there, shocked at my own outburst, and the silence that followed was eerie. No ticking, no deadlines, just my ragged breathing and a broken clock face on the carpet. I half expected time itself to stop, for the sun to refuse to set at 3:17 p.m. out of spite. But nothing catastrophic happened. In fact, for the first time in ages, I felt a tiny kernel of peace. The world didn't end when I stopped measuring every second of productivity, and time was mine again, at least for that afternoon. In breaking that clock, I had enacted a small, defiant surrender. I gave myself permission to let go, to not be productive for a while, and the ceiling did not cave in. It sounds silly that a busted clock on the floor was my big epiphany, but in that absurd moment I realized how twisted my relationship with rest had become. Rest wasn't an enemy or a reward, it was a lifeline, and I was finally grabbing it. A new softness, hope and rest as rebellion. Over weeks and months, relief blossomed into something gentler, a soft, steady hope. Not the manic optimism of motivational posters, but a quiet belief that I could have a life worth living, not just surviving. I found myself speaking to that long-lost self, the kid, the poet, the friend, and inviting them back home. I began setting boundaries like a newbie gardener putting up a fence, clumsily but earnestly, and no became a sacred word, not a failure. I left work at a reasonable hour and went to watch a film alone, and it felt as nourishing as a good meal. In the space that rest created, my identity started to grow back, like new skin after a burn. The funniest thing happened once I embraced rest. All the fears I had about being lazy or falling behind proved false. I had thought rest would ruin me, but instead it began to rebuild me. Epilogue. If you've listened this far, maybe part of you is as tired as I was. I want you to know you're not alone in that heavy, hollow feeling, and you're not lazy for being exhausted. In fact, choosing to rest might be the bravest damn thing you do. Take it from someone who had to break themselves to learn this. You deserve to press pause, to close your eyes without an alarm set. You deserve to have a day that isn't measured in tasks checked off, but in breaths taken. My story isn't a how-to, it's just a truth, a cautionary tale with a hopeful undertone. Burnout came for me, and I fell hard. But I got back up when I discovered the secret. I wasn't born to earn rest. I was born with rest woven into me, waiting to be claimed. So here I am, a little cracked but mending, sharing this with you from the other side. And if my brutally honest ramble resonated even a little, Well, maybe give that like button some love or hit subscribe to stick around. After all, we're all just human beings trying to figure this out. Might as well do it together. Thank you for listening, truly. Now go take a deep breath. The world can wait.